Hello everyone, welcome back to our geography series here on Educately. Today we're going to be comparing biomes, landscapes, and terrains. These are terms that people often use incorrectly. They often think they mean the same thing when in reality they have different definitions. So we're just going to clear up their definitions. Um, yeah, today's objective is pretty simple. There's only really one thing. We're just going to define and compare the three terms biomes, landscapes, and terrains. Talk about their correct definitions and give some examples. So let's get started. We're going to start with biomes. A biome is an area that's classified by the plants and animals that live there. What determines the types of plants and animals that live in a given area? Well, there's a lot of factors, but mostly it's just going to be things like temperature, soil, and the amount of sunlight in a given area. So on a large scale, these are the things that create biomes. These are what determine whether or not a place is a desert or a forest. So yeah. Examples of biomes include deserts, forests, tundras, grasslands, freshwaters, and marines. There's obviously some scientists think that there are, and geographers think that there are a lot more. It really depends. Some believe that it's really that these are like considered the main biomes, but there are other specific ones some geographers use. Special notes about biomes. Generally biomes are broader than ecosystems and habitats. These aren't the same thing. A lot of people think ecosystems are the same thing as biomes, but they're not. And ecosystems specifically are like they consist of like the interactions between the living and non-living parts of an environment, while a habitat is just basically where certain organisms and species go to live. So these aren't the same things. Generally, biomes are broader and contain multiple ecosystems and habitats because they are pretty large. Biomes can transform with climate change. So depending on like the factors I mentioned on the last slide, if those factors change over time due to climate change or if there's an ice age, that can impact the type of biome that's present in a given area. For instance, in northern Africa, you might know today there's a big desert there. It's called the Sahara Desert. But 10,000 years ago, northern Africa was a grassland with many lakes and rivers. So it had a completely different set of animals there. It shouldn't be confused with microbiomes. Microbiomes are like if you have like a small, it's harder to define, but if you have like a small area, or if you have like a given area, a microbiome is like specifically the microscopic organisms that live there. So it's usually biomes can also be used scientifically to denote the organisms and bacteria living inside of a body or like inside of a certain animal. It has different uses, but generally, they're just different from biomes. Just know that. On towards the right, we have a biomap of Africa. You probably cannot read the key because it's really small, but just know that the tan and slightly brown area generally consist of like deserts and sometimes mountain ranges, I believe, while the greener areas consist of rainforests and just temperate forests. Next, we're going to talk about landscapes. Landscapes are the visible parts of an area that can be seen from one place. So in simple terms, landscapes are the natural and man-made things you can see at once. So if you stand outside in the middle of your neighborhood and you look around, that's the landscape that's around you. A landscape can be divided into two like subcategories. First one is called natural landscape. It's basically the natural landforms, so the things created by nature that are there. Well, you can also talk about the cultural landscape, which are like specifically the man-made and human manipulated parts, what's around you. So if you went outside in your neighborhood, the houses would be a part of the cultural landscape. Um, yeah, so next we're going to look at two pictures and we're going to decide what part of the landscape or what type of landscape is most prominent. Here we have like a mountainous area, some hills. It doesn't seem to be too impacted by humans. There seems to be a little path, but mostly it seems pretty natural. So that's a natural landscape. Here we have a ranch. You can obviously see buildings and even like the land that's around it is probably manipulated by humans, so it can be used by animals. That's a part of what many farms and ranches do. So it can be described as cultural. Lastly, we have terrains. A terrain is like the vertical and like the horizontal characteristics of the land. So it's a bit hard to define it in general terms. But basically, it includes things like elevation and slope. Elevation is like how much higher you are above sea level, for instance, and like slope is like how steep or how flat the surrounding land is. So it's like the physical characteristics of the land based on like, things, as I mentioned, vertical and horizontal traits. So why is terrain important? It influences water flow because, if the area around you is like steep in a certain way, water is going to flow in one direction over the other. Water generally doesn't flow uphill. So, I mean, yeah. Suitability for farming. Flatter areas tend to be more suitable for farming and they tend to have better types of soil. So it's important to like, and historically speaking, it's been easier to farm in flatter areas. Obviously, there have been some exceptions where humans have adapted to mountainous areas to farm, but usually it's flatter areas that are better. And also local climate. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you an example of how climate has been impacted by, terrain. So this is an example of the Himalayas. This is like an image like taken from like satellite from space. It's on a pretty large scale. Like this area is probably like thousands of miles wide. These here, like this white-ish area, you can like probably tell from like the little bumps that are there. These are mountains. These are again the Himalaya mountains. You can probably notice how there's like grass and like a lot of vegetation on like the south side of the mountain, while like the north side is completely consisting of like it has some lakes, but it's mostly like dry. You can tell from like how tan it is. This is known as the rain shadow effect, and essentially what it means is that the windward or like the south side of the mountain, it's going to be it's going to have more vegetation than the other side of the mountain, which we call the leeward side of it. And this just shows how terrain, in this case mountainous terrain and very steep terrain, it can impact the local climate because one side of the mountain is going to have so much more vegetation and forest compared to the other side, which is so dry, and it really impacts the lives of the local people there. So it's just something that's interesting to see. Yeah, so that does it for today. Hopefully we just cleared some things up for you. You understand these terms better. If you have any questions, just contact us. And if you want to watch other videos on geography, just feel free to browse our site. We have other subjects as well. And yeah, that wraps it up for today. So thanks for watching.